Good morning, everybody. This is Diggs. It's another beautiful day out here in the Pacific Northwest, and today we're going to do my first of many videos regarding the individual classes. Rogue is my main class, and we're going to talk about how I approach it, what I think about the different skills, and we're going to talk about some of the builds that I think are pretty important or could work. So let's go ahead and dig in. Now, I want to be clear here. I don't really think there is one kind of build for Rogue, and I think there's very different builds that you could do probably with every class and still be effective at what you do. But before we dive into that, let's go ahead and explore what the actual Rogue abilities do, because it is going to be pretty important to understand these as we do go forward. So Arrow Storm is going to decrease movement speed of enemies, which is pretty important. We have multi-shot, which is going to push the enemy back and decrease movement speed. Again, this is going to be very important when we do talk about some of our passives later. And then Evasive Shot is going to be our highest damage ability. So that's going to be the one that enables you to jump back. Ancient Arrow is going to deal direct damage, so it is going to be very powerful against monsters as a burst skill. But overall, the thing and the trend that you're going to notice is Rogue really focuses on monster positioning, monster movement speed, and monster knockback. Now, as we were kind of pushing into defense tier 3 for Kingdom Defense, I did talk about with Thin Bear how important Rogue's abilities are to protect the crystals from monsters that will charge directly at the crystals. So if you are playing Rogue and your kingdom is starting to do Kingdom Defense tier 3, you are actually going to want to put Arrow Storm and multi-shot actually off automatic use, and you are going to want to automatically use them to knock monsters away from the crystal, because there are dragons that like charge towards the crystal. So that is something you may want to keep in mind as you are playing Rogue. Because those decreased movement abilities and these knockback abilities, while other classes have access to these type of abilities, these are our main abilities. This is what we're going to be bringing to Kingdom Defense in the future. For special skills, I do actually really like Solar Flare a lot. And one thing you're going to notice with Solar Flare is it does stun enemies, but it also lowers enemies' movement speed. And again, we're seeing this trend, right, of lowering movement speed. A lot of the times when I've been playing Rogue, you can get Solar Flare by just purchasing with the monster coins. Solar Flare, while I didn't have abilities for all of the different elements, is kind of the ability that I would slot in. It does a lot of damage, it's AoE, it stuns enemies. Until I really had full elemental builds, I was using Solar Flare quite frequently. Other than that, you do have kind of a couple of other Rogue abilities, and you hear about them a lot. You hear about, for example, Showtime a lot. A lot of Rogues talk about Showtime, and at its max level, Showtime is a 15-second buff for attack plus 20%, defense plus 30%, movement speed plus 40% for 15 seconds. And this does go on the person with the highest attack value in your party. And there is an element to Rogue that's very support oriented. And I do think there is a case to be made where if you are a player who's more free to play, if you are a player who is maybe not the strongest in your party or the strongest in your guild, I think that's the time that you should probably prioritize Showtime and Blazing Heart, potentially Overcharge Zone, these abilities that really buff your party, because you're going to be able to give more to your party this way. If you are someone who's more like me, who does seem to be a whale or a dolphin even, I do think you may be better off investing in some of the other abilities, specifically so that you can deal more damage. You get buffs from your opponents. I do think there's an element of kind of balancing everything out here. So I do think Showtime is a pretty good ability for rogues. I do think you could go the buff rogue route where you're using our Overcharge Zone as well, which increases in-range parties' attack speed and boosts their burst gauge. But the thing I don't like about Overcharge Zone is that boosting burst gauge doesn't really do much. In PvE, it's going to be really powerful, but in PvP, you don't really see burst gauge being used a whole ton. Blazing Heart, overall, I actually like Blazing Heart more than Showtime, just because it buffs all of your allies and it buffs attack, which is pretty powerful, and it buffs for 20 seconds. At least mine does right here at max level. It's going to buff for 20 seconds, and it's a 30-second cooldown. So I think Blazing Heart, particularly in PvP, is very powerful. I don't use it in PvE. Most of the time in PvE, I'm setting 3 elemental skills and using elemental advantage in order to deal damage. The other PvP ability that I don't have here is Distortion Arrow, and I probably will be purchasing Distortion Arrow just because it has an idea, it kind of has a pull-in associated with it, and it does subdue the opponent, so it is very powerful. It renders them immobile, and it slowly pulls them in. I do think this is going to be pretty important in PvP and Kingdom Defense, very similar to the Destroyer's Taunt ability, where you can taunt the monsters that are chasing the crystal and targeting it down in PvE off and actually have them attack the destroyers. So I think this ability will be important in both PvE and PvP for Rogue, but for right now I don't have it, and I'm not super like needing to get it right now. I think most of the time on my Rogue I'm just going full offensive right now because I do tend to have the power level that I need. So the TLDR for special primary skills, I would say, is if you're a support rogue, go support rogue, go Showtime, go Blazing Heart. I wouldn't go Overcharge Zone unless you're doing PvE. I would probably go Showtime, Blazing Heart, and then one offensive ability. Probably Solar Flare is what I would do here. Passives are very interesting, and I do tend to change up my passives quite a bit. So, of course, I get Attack Aura, right? Because you can get this to level 10 just from exchanging the tokens, the Field Boss tokens. Attack Boost is something that I'm working on right now, so stacking these, because I do just want to have the capability to go fully offensive when I want. I do have Defense Aura here set in this specific situation because when you are doing PvE, I was pushing high-level PvE content, and having that defense was really helpful, so I was doing that. I will also set Swift Movement. Now, Swift Movement increases movement speed by 10% and attack speed by 5% for 5 seconds on 5 successful hits, so you can basically just keep this up non-stop, and this does increase to attack speed by 10% for 5 seconds. I think if you don't have anything else to set as a rogue and you're wanting to deal damage, you could set this and try to optimize your damage that way. You can see I'm working on HP Aura because especially if you're a support rogue, you may want to consider getting party buffs to your allies. There's not that many of them. You have Speed Aura right here, which gives movement speed and slow resist, HP, and then you have the attack and defense. So you may be that person who's going to be applying those party buffs. There are some specific rogue abilities, so we will talk about those. Barrier Hunter is the first one, and I actually have started leveling my Barrier Hunter, and I'll tell you why. Barrier Hunter is one of those abilities that I think a lot of people look over, and it's damage to shielded enemies plus 30%, but more notably, it's damage to slowed enemies plus 10%, and I think that's really powerful. There's increasing attack, but then there's raw damage increase in the game. And if you remember, I was very conscious at the beginning of this video to show off Rogue's capability of slowing opponents in their main skills, right? Solar Flare slows opponents, two of Rogue's main skills slow opponents, right? So a lot of the time your enemies are going to be slowed. So this could be a very powerful passive on Rogue right now. If you are wanting to increase your damage, you know, you could set Barrier Hunter or you could set Swift Movement. Both of them are going to be really powerful in increasing your damage, and I think you would be fine going either way. Barrier Hunter also achievable from Field Boss tokens, so definitely consider getting Barrier Hunter. Burst Charge, again, Party's Burst Charge rate, I just really I haven't found the use for this yet. I don't think it's important. Maybe it will be in the future. I just like, that's our unique party buff. I can't do it. I don't feel like it's worth it long term right now for that. I feel like you'd rather have like Speed Aura or something else set. Risk and Return. Risk and Return is another raw damage increase. So it's At max level, it increases damage to enemies 4%, increases damage from enemies by 6% for 5 seconds on hit, and it stacks up to 5 times. So you are going to be able to get up to damage 20% as well as damage taken plus 30%. Of course, risk in return is going to be very powerful. The problem with risk in return that you're going to have is that you are going to have to actually get it. So while yes, you can get up to 10% damage increase with risk in return, you are going to have to get it from the shop. And if we go to the shop here and we pull up the magic tome category, you can see that it's worth 400 pages. And that's kind of a lot. It is kind of a lot of pages when you may just want to save up for distortion arrow, and you can probably get comparable damage from some of the other abilities that are in your skills, right? You could get probably comparable damage from running Barrier Hunter or from running potentially like Swift Movement level 10, right? Which will increase your attack speed. If you're increasing your attack speed, you'll of course want to have basic attack damage up to increase your quote unquote white damage, which would be your auto attack damage. So I don't think you need to go all out and get risk in return right away. I think you would be absolutely fine investing in Barrier Hunter or investing in Swift Movement and pairing those with both of the attack passives. And maybe it's one of those things where you already have an attack aura in the party, and so you are like, okay, I am going to set risk in return too. But I really don't think it's going to be super must have right now. Quick Overcome decreases the duration of stun, knockdown, and subdue. Definitely useful in PvP. I think everybody's probably eventually going to have this leveled, so you may find that. Perfect Chance, ooh, if we can get here. Crit rate plus 7.5% when attacking stunned, knockdown, or subdued enemies. Again, more of a PvP focused passive. This one's pretty interesting, Critical Flow, and again, this has the same problem where you are in a situation where this is going to be exchanged for tomes essentially, so you may not necessarily be able to get this, but it basically gives attack speed plus 10% for 5 seconds on a critical hit. Now that's really good, but again, since you're a rogue, if we go back to take a look at say Swift Movement, attack speed by 5% for 5 seconds on 5 consecutive hits, you're going to get 5 consecutive hits, quite a bit. So I don't think, like, we basically have our own version of Critical Flow essentially, and it's almost better and easier to max out. So I don't think we need to worry too much about Critical Flow right now. Deadly Tempo, very similar, attack speed plus 5% for 5 seconds when an enemy is defeated. Maybe you're going to go all out attack speed, that's absolutely possible. Reversal Chance, I mean, do you really get revived that much? Like, there's just a lot of things in here that I have questions about. So I do think that's how I've kind of been approaching my rogue. I've been focusing on leveling up kind of my universal passives first. That's why you see a lot of my rogue abilities are not leveled right now, because I've been focusing on leveling attack aura, defense aura, HP aura, all of these passives and skills that are kind of going to be universally applicable to my other classes. And that's kind of what I'm thinking for long term, is I'm going to get Barrier Hunter leveled, I'm going to get Swift Movement leveled, and those are kind of going to become my main passives, right? If someone else has attack aura in the party, which I think will be pretty likely, I'll probably set like Barrier Hunter, Swift Movement, and attack boost is probably going to be pretty good. Hopefully this video helps you guys. I understand there's a lot of people out there that, you know, say like, oh, rogue's best in slot is this, and I understand that, and I understand where the logic is coming from with that. But I really think there is a lot of flexibility with builds, and I think you can kind of go in different directions with each character. One thing I do want to mention as well is familiars. I know a lot of people talk about best in slot familiars with classes. Personally, if we're talking about PvP, I've really enjoyed Flutterby for his evasion. A lot of people talk about Hobgoblin as being really powerful because of the critical hit rate down. I recognize that that's probably pretty powerful and probably optimal in the future, but in a lot of PvP, I still prefer CC, and my Hobgoblin is not at the stage yet where that's going to be beneficial to me. Like, I'm more focused on CC and survivability right now and base stats, and my Hobgoblin doesn't have those base stats, so Potentially, I could see that being the best in the future. I'm definitely a huge proponent of Flutterbee in PvP, but usually I just run my strongest familiars right now, and I run them based on my elemental composition and what type of build I'm running. So usually I'm running different elemental builds for different situations. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys like this style of video. I'll probably do a video talking about all of the different classes and kind of my thoughts around their skills and abilities. So thank you so much, guys, and have a great rest of your day.